from Psalm 51. Have mercy on me, O God, according to your unfailing love. According to your great compassion, blot out my transgressions. Cleanse me with hyssop, and I will be clean. Wash me, and I will be whiter than snow. Let me hear joy and gladness. Let the bones you have crushed rejoice. Hide your face from my sins, and blot out all my iniquity. Create in me a pure heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me. Do not cast me from your presence, or take your Holy Spirit from me. Restore to me the joy of your salvation, and grant me a willing spirit to sustain me.
Jesus told this story. There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, "Father, give me the share of my wealth that will belong to me." So the father divided his assets between them, and a few days later, the younger son gathered up all he had and travelled to a distant region, and there he squandered his wealth in dissolute living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout that region, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that region, who sent him to his fields to feed the pigs. He would gladly have filled his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired hands have bread enough and to spare, but here I am dying of hunger. I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands.' So he set off and went to his father. But while he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran and put his arms around him and kissed him." When we hear the parables that Jesus told, we often need to identify the characters, who represents God and who represents us. And in this one, it's quite clear God is the father figure, and we are the prodigal son returning to the bosom of his love. However, I usually identify with the other son, the one who resents his brother being celebrated on his return to the family home. Jesus told this parable to demonstrate that God is always there, just waiting for us to come back to him. In the parable, we know that the father represents God, who didn't deny either son anything. God didn't stop the younger son going away to find himself, even though it made him sad. In the 1st century, the oldest son would have inherited nearly everything, so the younger one, the one we call the prodigal, really took what he was not entitled to. I do feel a bit sorry for the older son who stayed behind, sometimes called the faithful son. After his brother left, he would have had a lot more work to do. So from my human perspective, his behaviour and resentment of his brother is understandable. But God says, "You were always with me and could always have had a party." The older son who stayed behind didn't realise he could do this. And I wonder if he had a very different relationship with his father. Perhaps he thought his father was cold and distant, and he didn't feel able to ask anything of him. And sometimes our relationship with God is like that too. God as old and distant and unrelatable too. We might have been brought up to believe that God is austere and uncaring, too busy smiting people and being angry to hear about our needs and concerns and wants. This has always been called the parable of the prodigal son. But if you look at what prodigal means, the dictionary says a person who spends money in a recklessly extravagant way. And I think this parable shows us that it is God who is prodigal, recklessly extravagant with love and forgiveness. I left the church when I was 16 because I was told God didn't love lesbians and would not accept LGBTQ people into his kingdom. When I came back to church, God really did welcome me back with open arms. And that's another thing. Did you catch that bit? That God went running out to meet the reckless son? Well, let me tell you, first century men didn't run. Again, I'm not condoning first century practices, but men didn't run. Obviously, athletes and messengers did, but it was considered undignified for older, wealthy men. To run out and meet this sun was shocking. It was something only a woman would do. So think about your relationship with God. Distant, austere, unable to listen to anything you have to say? Or is God like a mother figure running out to greet you?